Augmentation Evoker is the new kid on the block in WoW. That's right, it's World of Warcraft's first ever support build, and today I'm going to help you master it as a beginner with absolutely no information overload, giving it to you in a really easy to follow format. The first thing we're going to look at as an Aug Evoker is going to be our stat priority. This is my very own priority pyramid, and that means that at the bottom, this is what you're going to want the most of, and it's the largest part. So to start off, we're going to want mastery, and we're going to want lots of it, going up to then haste, then crit, and then versatility, needing the least of. Overall though, I wouldn't worry too much about this. If you're getting something that is an eye level increase, as a beginner, this is generally what you're always going to want to go for without having to worry too much about secondary stats. And before we actually look at the talents and core rotation themselves, let's look at some of the cooldowns and utilities that we have available as an Augmentation Evoker in 10.2. Now, one thing I will say is that you should always look through your spellbook, maybe when you're more comfortable with the actual build and rotation, to look at all the abilities you have available. These are some of the core ones that I think you should specifically be more aware of. So first up at the top here, we have Obsidian Scales. This is quite literally a personal defensive that is going to reduce your damage taken. Then we've got some really interesting ones. First up is Time Spiral. This is actually going to allow allies to cast their movement ability even if it is on cooldown. And this is only in a short space. I think it's around 10 seconds, but it does mean that they're going to be able to use that ability even if it is on cooldown. So make sure you always let them know that you're going to be using this. Then we've got Tip the Scales, and we're going to be using this very specifically in our rotation. So as an Augmentation Evoker, a lot of your spells are empowerable, meaning that rather than channeling them, you actually have to kind of like hold down the button and it kind of builds up inside you, and then you breathe out a huge kind of powerful spell. And the longer you hold that down or empower it, the more powerful that spell is going to be. You know, how a kind of dragon breathes out fire, etc. And you're going to see that in the rotation. It's really, really cool. And this cooldown, Tip the Scales, is going to make it so that your next empowered spell is instant and casts at kind of max empowerment, which is really, really, really useful. And last but not least, we've got Spatial Paradox. This is going to allow you and a healer in your group to cast while moving and also at an increased range. Now, one thing I will say about Augmentation Evoker is you can target who you want your spells to go on, but some of them actually have their own AI. For example, with Spatial Paradox, it will target a healer automatically. And we have some other spells that are going to target DPS. And again, you can specifically choose who to put these on or let the AI do it itself. As a beginner, you may just want to let the AI, take control, and scary thought. And then as you get more intermediate and advanced and you're more used to the spec, maybe then you should start looking at actually, more specifically optimizing who you're placing certain spells on. But now on to some of the utilities we have in our toolbox. The biggest one and the most important, I would say, is Fury of the Aspects. This is Bloodlust, or Heroism as it's otherwise known, for Evokers. That's right, we do have Bloodlust. Next up, we've got Zephyr, and that's going to actually reduce the damage for our whole party, and it's going to apply a speed boost. It's a very useful one there. Then we've got some attunements. If you've played a Paladin or you've played a Druid with your different kind of forms, you will see this as your kind of aura bar. And these are two attunements that we have as a Augmentation Evoker. One is bronze and one is black. The bronze one is an aura that is going to buff our allies' speed, and the black is going to be one that buffs their health. So another point to say is that all of our spells revolve around the different aspects, blue, green, bronze, black, red, etc. And each spell will go into one of these categories. Then we have Hover, which is going to give us a increased movement speed, and it also means that we can cast while moving. And lastly, we've got Quell, which is quite simply our Augmentation Evoker's Interrupt. Okay, now that we are actually in-game, let's look at the talents and rotation. This build here is the starter build I would recommend. It's a bit more raid focused and it's a bit more single target focused, but as a beginner, this is going to take you a long way. When you're really comfortable with your rotation and the spec, I would always say look through Wowhead, etc., and just look at the builds available for AoE and Mythic Plus and Raid, and maybe you can start tweaking them to be more specific. But this is a great all-rounder general beginner build that I would say you should take, and there is of course an import string below in the description. So now let's actually look at the main rotation itself. A few little things I just want to show you before we do that. First of all is this weak aura that I use. I will put a link in the description below, and it's very, very useful. You can see here it tracks our main resource, which is Essence, by the way. More on that when we actually start using it. We have our auras down here that I previously mentioned, bronze and black. That's near my shoulder if you can't see. And then over here, if I move out of the way, we do also have Blessing of the Bronze. You can see here, this is going to reduce the cooldown of major movement abilities for all party and raid members by 15% for an hour. Think of this as your party-wide buff like Arcane Intellect or Mark of the Wild if you're a druid, etc. Now then, let's actually look at the rotation. So first up on our ability bar here, we've got Prescience. This is going to increase the critical strike and occasionally copy damage and healing of your allies. Again, this will be affected by the AI. I will say though, your tier set this season heavily impacts this, making every third one much more powerful. So you are going to want to be careful how you use this when you get a bit more comfortable with the spec. And just again, this rotation is a beginner rotation. Once you're comfortable, I always say that you should kind of graduate into a more advanced rotation if you can or want to. Remember, it's a game and there's no harm in staying at the beginner rotation if that is what you're comfortable with. But just so people are aware, this is a beginner rotation and there are a lot more advanced rotations out there. So we're going to want to use Prescience as our main ability. You can see this proc here has popped up, and I'm going to go through what that is in a minute, so don't worry about that too much right now. Second on our list, we have Ebon Might. This is going to increase your nearest 4 allies' primary stat and causing you to do more damage. Now, this is something we're going to want to extend with our other spells. This also is going to prefer damage dealers, by the way. Then we have Breath of Eons. Basically, this is going to accumulate some of the damage done to your targets and then explode onto them. And you're going to want to make sure you're targeting as many enemies as you can with this. When we use it, you can see here, we can extend how far we go with it. And we can click it and we're going to fly across and everything it's going to hit in that area is going to be affected. Hence me saying, try and get as many into that area as you can. The next spell we're actually going to use is over here at 8. And this is called our Fire Breath. Now, this is our Empower spell that I was talking about. This is the main Empower spell we're going to be using as an Org Evoker. Now, one other thing to note is that Tip the Scales is one of the cooldowns I mentioned earlier. Compress time to make your next Empowered spell instantly cast at its maximum power. That is what we're going to be using with our Fire Breath. So just to show you how Fire Breath works, we're going to hold down number 8. You can see it's empowering 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we release and it kind of lets it out. So each little color, you can see it empowering at 1, 2, 3, and 4 there. What this is going to do is it's going to burn everything in a kind of cone, if you will, in front of us. And that is going to increase the duration of our Ebon Might effects. Remember, Ebon Might is the one at number 2 here. And this is going to extend it. So just to show you it again, without the cooldown, because that would make it instant. Again, 1, 2, 3, and empower 4. And that is how you empower it, okay? And we always want to use that one at the maximum empower if we can. Now, you can see here that this has actually caused a buff on our weak aura. And this is actually called Leaping Flames. This ability here at number 6, send a flickering flame towards your target and it's going to either damage or heal them. This buff, which we have 4 stacks of, is going to mean that our living flame is going to hit 4 additional targets. This is coming from our Fire Breath. If we use our cooldown, which is going to make it instant at maximum empower, you can see here we've got 4. Basically, if you use your Fire Breath at empower 1, you're only going to get 1 stack of that. Use it at 2, you're going to get 2. Do it at maximum power of 4, you're going to get 4 stacks of it. When we use our living flame here, you can see it uses that buff up and it's going to hit up to 4 additional targets, doing damage or healing them, which is fantastic. So just to recap where we are so far, we're going to use Prescience and then Ebon Might. We're then going to use Breath of Eons and Fire Breath to extend our Ebon Might. And when we use Fire Breath, we're going to get a buff and we're going to make sure we use that buff on Living Flame to hit additional targets. Now, after that, we're actually going to go back to number 4, and we're going to use Upheaval. This is also going to increase the duration of our Ebb and Might, and we can just use this at Empower 1, or basically use it instantly. Then we are also going to use Blistering Scales, and we're going to put this on the tank, and this is basically a defensive shield sort of thing, not an absorb shield per se, but it's going to increase their armor by 30% of our own, and mean that the melee attacks that the target takes is going to have a fawn effect in a cleave. And this can only happen every few seconds. You can only have this on one target. I always say put it on the tank. Next thing is, again, with our Living Flame, this can actually cause that proc to happen that we're seeing here. And this is called Essence Burst. So going again onto our Essence, which is this resource here, you can see here that number 7, Eruption, is proccing. This means that using Eruption will cost no Essence. And Eruption is going to be basically our next priority on the list, which is our Essence dump, you could basically say. If you're capped on Essence, if you've got too much of it, or you get that proc, use it on Eruption, and it's going to use the proc for free Essence, or when you're capped at it, etc., it's just going to dump out that excess Essence that we don't want. So that is our Essence dump. Remember, we can use Hover if you want to cast while moving. If you think that's a bit advanced, or you just aren't used to using it, or can't, or it's on cooldown, we can use Azure Strike. This is instant, meaning we can use it while moving and on the move like this. It's repeatable, so whenever you're moving a lot, you can just use that to get some quick, easy damage out that is instant and still do DPS on the move. One last thing we're going to look at is actually a few healing spells, and I'm going to show you the talent tree again, because this is actually going to impact spells we're about to use, and I think this is really important. First one is up here, Scarlet Adaptation. You're going to store 20% of your effective healing up to a certain amount, and your next damaging Living Flame, which you're going to be using anyway, remember, is going to consume all of that stored healing to increase its damage dealt. Another one is Ancient Flame. Casting Emerald Blossom or Verdant Embrace, the 2 healing spells we're going to look at, is going to reduce the cast time of your next Living Flame by 40%. Remember, this is our Living Flame here. So this is Emerald Blossom, one of the healing spells. This is going to grow a bulb from the Emerald Dream at an ally's location, and then it's going to heal some people in a nearby area. Then we have Verdant Embrace, where you're going to fly to an ally and heal them. And you click that onto the ally. I didn't fly anywhere because I clicked it on me, but that's going to fly to an ally and heal them. So again, those 2 talents work with your healing spells, empowering your Living Flame. If that's too complex, don't worry about that bit too much. That kind of comes at the end of the rotation when your Ebb and Might is not up on the target. And that is it. That is quite literally the Augmentation Evoker main beginner rotation. Again, once you're really comfortable with this, don't feel scared to graduate from this build into more advanced ones, but this should give you a really good understanding and foundation into how Augmentation Evokers work. Do check out my other videos, because I've done a lot of class guides for 10.2 of Dragonflight, and also if you do have any questions, etc., you can drop them down below in the comments, which I try and answer as many as I can, or join my Discord, where we have a lot of other people who are also learning and playing together and doing Mythic Plus, etc., especially at low keys for beginners.